When Daniel bought the farm, he believed he was buying silence, a wide stretch of land where the air smelled like rain and soil and second chances, a place far removed from the city that had ground him down into something thin and exhausted. The real estate listing was brief, almost careless. Remote farmland, structures included, sold as is. No neighbors for miles, no warnings, no mention of the three women. The first night, as the sun collapsed into the hills and the sky burned purple, Daniel realized the quiet felt watched. The farmhouse groaned like it was remembering old footsteps. Wind passed through the fields in long, deliberate breaths. Then came the shadows, too tall, too slow, moving near the barn. When he stepped outside with a flashlight, the beam climbed legs that should not have been possible, bodies that blocked the stars, faces half-lit and calm, ancient and unmistakably female. Three of them, giants, they introduced themselves not with threats but certainty. They had been there longer than the farm, longer than the fences, longer than the deeds and signatures that claimed ownership. They spoke of arrangements, of balance, of how the land demanded connection to survive. Their voices were low, resonant, intimate, as though they were already inside his thoughts. And then one of them smiled, slow, knowing, and said the words that shattered every assumption he had left. "You're going to belong to us, Daniel." Not shouted, not rushed, spoken like a promise that had already been kept. Fear tangled with something else he didn't want to. Name curiosity, gravity. As the night closed around them, the giants leaned closer, their presence overwhelming, warm and impossibly personal. And Daniel understood one chilling truth. The farm had never been empty, and neither was his future. By the second night, Daniel stopped pretending he could leave. His truck wouldn't start. The road seemed to stretch farther every time he walked it. The giants, Ira, Mael, and Rowan, didn't restrain him. They didn't need to. They explained the rules as if reciting something sacred. The land fed them, but only through chosen bonds. A human anchor was required. Someone willing, someone present. Someone who felt the pull as strongly as the soil itself. Their size was intimidating, yes, but it was their patience that unraveled him. They waited. They listened. They learned him. Each interaction carried a charge. Hands hovering but not touching. Voices lowering when they spoke his name. Glances that lingered just long enough to make his heart forget how to slow down. The agreement, when it came, was spoken beneath the stars. The grass pressed flat around them, as if the earth itself leaned in to listen. It wasn't described in crude detail. It was framed as unity, as ritual, as something powerful enough to sustain an entire valley. Daniel realized this wasn't about possession. It was about choice. About stepping into a life that would never again be small or ordinary. When he finally nodded, the night seemed to exhale. The giant smiled, not triumphant but relieved. The future unfolded not in explicit moments, but in implication, shared warmth, towering silhouettes blocking moonlight. The sense of being claimed and protected all at once. As dawn crept over the farm, Daniel stood at the center of a world that now knew his name, bound by a pact older than fear and stronger than doubt. And as the screen fades to black, one truth remains clear: this farm doesn't just grow crops, it grows legends. By the third morning, Daniel stopped measuring time in hours and started measuring it in moments. Moments when the wind shifted and carried their voices across the fields. Moments when the ground seemed to hum beneath his boots, as if the farm itself were aware of his footsteps. He woke before dawn, the farmhouse wrapped in a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. Outside, the giants were already awake. They always were. Ira stood near the fence line, her silhouette cutting into the pale horizon like a living monument, arms folded as if she were guarding the land itself. Mael was seated on the porch steps, impossibly still, her eyes closed, palms resting against the wood as though she were listening to something beneath it. Rowan leaned against the shed, red hair catching the first light of morning like a warning flame. None of them spoke when Daniel stepped outside, yet the silence felt intentional, heavy with expectation. When they finally looked at him, really looked, the weight of their attention pressed down on his chest, not suffocating but grounding. as if his presence had finally been acknowledged as necessary rather than incidental. Ira was the first to speak, her voice calm but resonant, explaining that the bond was not a single act, not a single night, but an ongoing alignment. The land did not respond to force or fear, only to consistency, to trust built slowly under watchful skies. Mile added that Daniel's resistance had never been a flaw, it was proof he was still choosing, still capable of saying yes rather than being taken. Rowan said nothing at first, only stepped closer. Close enough that Daniel had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes, close enough that he could feel the heat of her presence, like standing near a sun-warmed stone. "You're still afraid," she said quietly. Not as an accusation, but as an observation. Daniel nodded, because lying felt pointless here. Rowan smiled, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with something like understanding, and replied, "Good. Fear means you know this matters." As the day unfolded, they showed him the farm as it truly was. Fields that responded when they walked through them, soil that softened under their bare feet, structures that had been repaired, not with tools, but with touch and time. Daniel began to realize that ownership, in the human sense, had never applied here. This was not land to be bought. It was land to be joined. By evening, when the sky burned, orange and the shadows of the giants stretched impossibly long across the ground, Daniel felt the pull again, not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady, patient. The giants gathered around him, not enclosing, not trapping, simply present, and in that circle of towering figures and quiet certainty, Daniel understood that the real transformation wasn't what the bond would demand of him, but what it would give him in return: purpose, belonging, and a place in a story far larger than himself. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will change everything.